Hello, I'm Greg Ayotte. I am the Director of Consumer Services for the Brain Injury Association of America. And I'm here today with Kelly Lang, who's a member of the Brain Injury Association Advisory Council. Just want to talk a little bit about what the Advisory Council is and what we're here to talk about. So the Brain Injury Association Advisory Council, it's a group of survivors from across the country that work together to meet the mission of the Brain Injury Association, and that they work to increase awareness and understanding about brain injury. And they do this through a variety of ways, one of which is working collaboratively to develop delightful articles that go into our newsletter, The Challenge, or to create these videos, or to do other things both locally and nationally. So, as we said, the council came together to write this article about life after brain injury. One of the topics and issues was about the role of the caregiver in this. And that's why Kelly's here today to talk about that. So Kelly, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Sure. I'm Kelly Lang. I live in Northern Virginia, and my daughter and I were both in a car accident 20 years ago, and she was 3 years old, and she had severe TBI. And it wasn't until 3 months later that I was diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome, otherwise mild traumatic brain injury, although there's not really something called mild. So it's been a journey, to say the least.
Sure. So we're going to talk a little bit about the caregiver's role after brain injury. So why is the caregiver's role important for people with brain injury and others?
So I think that caregiver's role is really important because, number one, a lot of times the patient or the brain injured cannot really talk for themselves. They can't really, some of them have aphasia where they can't come up with the words. Some of them, like in our case, Olivia had to learn how to do everything, so she couldn't communicate. Or they're just not, there's a fatigue issue and they just don't have the stamina. So the caregiver has to act as the ombudsman or the, intermediary person to kind of convey to the doctors, the therapists, whoever you're working with, that this is what's going on. This is, can you give me advice? Can you give me, solutions, or, what can we do? Where do we go next with this? And I think that's pivotal role, and they act as the patient's advocate, more or less.
I think the really important point to note is that sometimes people think of caregiving as the physical act of, helping with dressing and bathing and stuff, but there's a lot more to caregiving, or can be a lot more. And what you're describing is that more the advocacy, right? Being their voice, helping to figure out what's the best next steps for them. That is caregiving as well.
That's a good point, Greg, because when I say caregiver, I don't even think about, all those other things. I mean, she was my daughter, so of course I did all that, but the main role has been just to advocate on her behalf, especially with the school system.
So what do you think was one of the hardest things about being a caregiver for a person with a brain injury?
Well, if you live with the person who you're caregiving for, you don't have any time off. You're always together. And that can be very difficult for both the caregiver and the person. There's times you're going to butt heads and you're going to not agree on things. And, you also need your space. So you have to work that in. And, all caregivers talk about having the self-care. And I can preach it, but I don't know if I necessarily follow it all the time. I've tried to more and more. I think I do a better job now. But it is, you have to learn when to step back. You have to learn when to be very assertive. And then other times when to just step back and say, okay, I'm going to rethink this. Maybe, I'm being too harsh, or maybe I don't understand this, and take a step back and think about it and then proceed. So it's playing that delicate dance of when to push and when to back off. And with time, I think you figure it out. And of course, getting advice from other people also helps tremendously.
I think in your situation too, it's kind of this, Olivia was really young. So you have this idea of, so she is already developing and growing. So you're dealing with that already and the brain injury on top. So, it's always that balancing act of when do I be protective? When do I let her learn? That's definitely a balancing act.
Yeah. And I think as a parent, you're used to doing that. So it's a little
Yeah.
easier. Whereas if it's, a couple and they've never had that experience, it's going to be a lot harder.
Yes, definitely. So what's one piece of advice that you would share to other caregivers just kind of starting out on this?
Okay. So the number one advice is you need to get your own rest because you are going to get burnt out. You need to take a few deep breaths every time a doctor, therapist, a teacher calls and, says something. You take time, think about it, kind of figure out what your options are. But if you really feel strongly that the person's not getting what the services or what they need, then I would reach out, talk to association representatives. I mean, I've called BIAA, I've called my own state, association, Brain Injury Association of Virginia, and trying to get those resources because those are pivotal to kind of try to get you to the right answers. They seem to know who to call and, how to handle it. And also trying to have you and that person have fun in other ways. Because you don't want to have this relationship where you're always telling them what to do. You also want to build in some fun, no matter how you can do that. Even as it's sitting, listening to music, watching a TV show, going to a concert, whatever it is that other person enjoys doing, you really need to do that and to get out of the house.
That is so true. Yeah, that's an important part about that. It can't always be about like rehab and getting better and taking care of and telling them what to do because that gets tired quick.
Oh, yeah. I mean, then they feel like you're one of their doctors and such. So,
yeah, definitely. So, go ahead.
I think it's also important that a caregiver tries to tell the doctors exactly what goes on at home, because what goes on at home and what goes on outside are two different things. And a lot of times the doctors will take the patient's word for what it is. And I think the caregivers live it day to day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they really know the gist of what's going on. And you have a gut sense of what's happening. And there was one time with a neurologist where I had a gut sense and I told him what I thought. He says, "You're right. That's exactly what's happening." So try to trust your gut.
Yeah, definitely. I used to tell the families, I'm like, you are the expert in this person. Like everyone else has seen them since the injury. You know this person better than anybody. So your insight and intuition is a strong indicator of usually what's really going on. I think the other factor in this too is for family members with a person with the injury, very often they are going to act the worst with the people they feel the safest with, right? So they can put the filter on for a while out in public, but when they get home and that filter, and that's something they're not always aware they're doing, is that the filter relaxes and you see more of kind of what's really going on for a bit. And that for a caregiver can feel very stressful and overwhelming, like, why am I getting this? But it's a sign that they feel safe with the person, and it's good information for the caregiver to be aware of, like what's really going on. That information shared with professionals can be very helpful, right, in trying to make sure that the right treatments and therapies and issues are addressed.
Yeah, I mean, we had that situation where Olivia, as soon as she got off the school bus and she saw me, she burst into tears. And this was going on every single day for weeks and months. And had a meeting at the school, and one of the psychologists said, yeah, when she's in this building, she's totally fine. We'd never know anything was wrong, but she's just bottling it all up. And the moment she sees her mother, she's just losing it. That's exactly what was happening. And until we could figure out what the problem was. And yeah, you're right. They feel safest with us. So that we're going to take the brunt. Yeah. It's not fun, but
unfortunate. Double-edged sword. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. So thank you for coming on and kind of sharing a little bit about your experiences, sharing some tips and advice for others. We'd encourage people to go and watch the other videos. You can download the article in the challenge from the BIA website. You're always welcome to contact us if you ever have questions or looking for info. So Kelly, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Greg.